Robert Buedelsbacher here, or some know me as Beetlejuice. I have a special guest joining us from all the way out in Jerusalem. Some know him as the grandfather of cannabis, Raphael Mechoulam. It's great that you could join us today. And I know some are curious. You're a grandfather to some, but how do you get the title grandfather of cannabis?
Well, most probably because we started working on the cannabis plant in its constituents many years ago. Actually about 50 years ago. So that deserves the title grandfather. Uh, what we did at that time, 50 years ago, was to identify the active compound in cannabis. Surprisingly, contrary to the active compound in opiates and active compound in coca leaves, the active compound in cannabis had never been isolated in pure form. Its structure, of course, was unknown, and therefore very little work could be done. So we did that about 50 years ago, and most probably that's why people think that, I'm kind of a grandfather of that of that group of compounds.
Before you studied cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system, you were in the army, I believe, studying insecticides?
Yes, I worked in the army, actually. I was a very young man then. 50 years is a long time. Before that, I was in the army, and I served in a medical research laboratory. And at that time, there were insect problems in Israel, and we were looking at insecticides, and we were investigating. So I did that in the army. I was very young, in the mid-20s.
Do you believe that cannabis should only be available for those who are medically ill, or do you believe all use is medicinal?
Well, one should try, this is my view, one should try to separate the two things. The medical use should follow medical strategies. One should try to identify the active compounds or the active mixtures. One should do all the medical investigations in clinical trials, modern clinical trials, which unfortunately very few are available at the moment with cannabinoids. So we should try to put cannabis and its components in the medical field. The recreational use is something else entirely. It has nothing to do with its medical value. It's a social thing, and it has to be decided by the population of a certain country. If a country believes that cannabis should be completely legalized, more or less like in Holland, fine. In other countries that are more conservative, they will decide, no, thank you, not at the moment. The two things are completely different.
Do you believe that if someone were to ingest cannabis on a daily basis, do you believe that it could be harmful or beneficial? Or if they were to do in an abundance, for say, like if someone smoked all day to help, ease their pain, even in so much as a concentrate form, like dabs, for say, would that be something that would be harmful or beneficial, do you think, for an individual?
Well, here you are touching a medical thing. Yes, most definitely cannabinoids affect pain, particularly some types of pain, pain that have to do with damage to the nervous system, things like that, not every type of pain. So most definitely this belongs to the medical side. And if it helps a person, why not? I mean, a person will try to sit around without the pain. What you asked at the beginning was, will it cause damage? Well, basically, there are problems in acute use. I mean, we know the acute use causes, if you wish to call them problems, that's fine, but changes in mood and things of that sort. The problem is, does it cause any damage if one uses cannabis on a chronic basis? If the use is very high indeed, person uses it daily or so on, about 10% of users can get addicted. Now, luckily, that kind of addiction is not as potent as opiate addiction, but it's still addiction. Most people do not get addicted because they use it on a, well, on and off basis, but it's a possibility. Do we have any other damages? Not to any major extent, but I'm not happy when young people use cannabis, or very young people till the age of 18 use cannabis on a chronic basis. And the reason for that is their central nervous system is developed, and cannabis, by definition, affects the nervous system. And I'm not sure what a drug may do to a nervous system that's developing on a very long-term basis, use, and for a very long period. On short-term basis, I don't think that anything has been noted. A bit complicated. Sorry for.
You actually hit my next question. Do you believe everyone's endocannabinoid system, or CB1 and CB2 receptors, react the same? I think you touched upon this on your experiment with the cake, but how, for example, knowing that our bodies produce various cannabinoids naturally, it'd be safe to assume that it affects everyone differently for that reason. And my kind of guess is possibly maybe is it because they may be lacking or missing a specific cannabinoid in their endocannabinoid system?
Well, the endocannabinoid system has turned out to be very, very central. And there are major differences between the CB1 endocannabinoid system, CB2 endocannabinoid system. The CB2 endocannabinoid system seems to be a protective one. It seems to work in parallel to the immune system. It's mostly, not exclusively, but mostly a protective system. It guards us against certain diseases. It helps in a long list of diseases. It's a very, very positive system that we have. And it, in many cases, works against initial diseases that are just starting. So the CB1 has more to do with mood, we call it anandamide because we thought it has to do with happiness, and most probably it does have to do with happiness. So there are two different things, and both of them are very, very important in our lives. One has to do with our mood. The other one has to do with our health.
Some are familiar that if the plant is cut down too early, or if the trichomes are still clear, you have short-lived effects, versus if it's picked on time, the trichomes typically are cloudy and they provide more of that energetic appeal for the medical patient. Or finally, if it's picked later, it gives more of that amber look, and then it gives that sedative feeling. Do you believe there's any medicinal difference between the exact plant if it's consumed before or if it's aged entirely?
Well, we don't have enough chemical data. The plant produces not THC and cannabidiol, but their precursors, cannabidiol acid and THC acid. And these compounds are slightly different. They don't cause the THC-like effects. So if it depends on when it's cut. If it contains only the acids, then it does not cause any central nervous system effects except on smoking. But if one eats it, then there are no effects. We don't know enough about it. We know that there are differences. We know that additional compounds that are present in the plant have to do something with the effects of both THC and cannabidiol. We've called that the entourage effect. But we don't know enough, and obviously the compounds there are of importance because we know that people won't smoke THC, won't eat THC. They would very much prefer to have the whole plant. So we don't know enough about these effects, unfortunately.
Do you believe that even if the plant isn't decarboxylated, do you still think that there's medicinal benefits from the plant in its raw form versus when it is decarboxylated or when you lose the acidic part of it?
It depends on how it's being used. If it is smoked, then it doesn't make any difference because on smoking, because of the high temperature, it's decarboxylated. If it's on taking it orally, yes, it makes a difference.
Have you seen any correlations or patterns from various cannabinoids and terpenes? Or I don't know if you can test for that or if you do personally. Like, if you had a strain that was heavy in myrcene and you found that it maybe correlated to higher CBD levels versus ones that had beta-caryophyllene that may have had more THC instead of CBD.
Well, we know that there is a difference between cannabis sativa and cannabis indica. I mean, there are strains. They're the same plant, but they're strains, and there is a difference. So most people will prefer to have cannabis sativa in the morning and cannabis indica in the evening. Cannabis indica is more relaxing. Cannabis sativa is more invigorating, if you wish. And we are not sure why this happens, but it seems to be seems to be true. So we have to investigate the interactions between the terpenes and probably other compounds with both THC and CBD. But at the moment, no, we don't know much.
We all know the negative stigma attached to cannabis. In all of your research, has anyone ever changed your opinion on cannabis or belittled you in the way that, or in what you're studying?
Sorry, has anybody changed his mind, or whether I have changed my mind?
I mean, has anyone ever made you feel bad for studying cannabinoids, or
No,
okay.
no, no. I'm a scientist. I study something that is there. As a matter of fact, when I started looking at cannabis, I used to get the material from the police. I just was in touch with them and said, we want to investigate cannabis. Can we get some of the material you usually get and burn? And they said yes, as I was in a reliable institute, and they didn't believe that I'll go around selling it. They gave me kilograms of hashish, no problem at all. As a matter of fact, at the Hebrew University, where I continued working on cannabis, I was also involved in the administration. I became the academic head of the institute. If people thought that what I'm looking at is not should not be looked into, I wouldn't have been elected to be head of the university.
In your documentary, The Scientist, you say we should follow research pathways that are not being followed by major groups. Knowing that cannabis as medicine still isn't supported by many, or is extremely limited if you don't have the money or DEA approval, how would you recommend an average person or who is passionate about cannabis get involved with cannabis research? Is there a certain school or course of study you'd recommend they start?
Well, it seems there is a difference between research in different countries. For various reasons, in the U.S., there have been problems. Unfortunately, there are very, very few clinical trials that are taking place in the U.S., which shouldn't be so. There is a clinical trial on epilepsy, but not on many other things. Now, I see no reason why it shouldn't happen, but there is a stigma, and most probably the clinicians have problems doing that, which probably is not the right way to do it, because we should have clinical trials, modern clinical trials, and as in many other fields, in most other fields, the U.S. has done most of these clinical trials, and in the field of cannabis, it's not true. So there we are.
So an easy answer would be to move out of the U.S. and move to Jerusalem with you, right?
Well, okay. Now, some guests are coming in. Do we have to go on?
I just have a few others. You suggested that endocannabinoids in breast milk contribute to the hedonic and possible medicinal effects to a baby/fetus. Do you believe the consumption of...
Sorry, can you repeat that? People were coming in.
Yeah.
Yes, can you repeat that?
You suggested that endocannabinoids in breast milk contribute to the hedonic and possible medicinal effects to a baby/fetus. Do you believe the consumption of cannabis may be beneficial for mothers, and if so, during the entire pregnancy or just after birth?
Well, I don't believe that pregnant women should take any drug. Pregnancy is a very complicated situation, and it's impossible to do clinical trials of this sort. And so I've told, for example, my daughters, when we're pregnant, don't try not to take any drug, because I have no idea what any drug, aspirin, any drug will do on an unborn baby. So we don't know. But the second part of your question was, yes, we know that the cannabinoid system is involved in suckling, and if we block the cannabinoid system, then the baby, or at least in mice, it doesn't suckle. So it is involved, though luckily women have, in most cases, normal endocannabinoid system, and that doesn't interfere. But chances are that in the few number of women that have problems with their baby suckling, chances are that maybe one should try to do some experiments and find out whether it can be helped.
Well, and I know you have to go. This is going to be the last question for you. I know you're always looking for the next step in cannabinoids. Is there anything specific that you're researching about cannabis right now, or that you would like to research in the near future?
Well, there have been 3 phases of cannabinoid research. One of them was explicitly on the plant itself, the cannabinoids in the plant. The second phase was a large number of people working on that, on the endogenous cannabinoids found in our body, in our brain, in our body. And unfortunately, these compounds, which are of extreme importance, of extreme interest, have never been administered to a human being, which is strange. When insulin was discovered in the 20s, almost 100 years ago, it became a drug after 6 months. And anandamide has never been given to a human. But anyway, this was the second stage. Now, I believe we are in a third stage, where we and many other groups are looking at compounds which are like anandamide, chemically like anandamide, fatty acids bound to amino acids, and we have about 200 of them in our body. And many of them, those that have been investigated, many of them have biological activities of many types. And these biological activities in many cases have protective features and so on. So a lot of people are looking at those compounds which we produce. They are endocannabinoid-like compounds. So there we are now, and probably people will be looking at them for the next decade or so.
Huh. Well, it was an absolute blast being able to interview you, and safe to say that you forever have changed the world from the research you've done and will continue to do. And in the event you ever visit Chicago, Illinois, or if I can ever afford a trip to Jerusalem, I would absolutely love to meet you in person.
Many thanks. I appreciate that. Many thanks.
It was a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.